again, my name is Jason Tanner. My business is Zero Noise Marketing, and we do consulting on marketing projects, web design, programming, and all of that kind of good stuff. So today's presentation obviously is about artificial intelligence, how we can potentially use it in our marketing. And just by show of hands, who's played with some of these artificial intelligence tools? You know, say, oh, there you go. Yeah. So I was going to start by saying this is kind of where we were at in the 80s with personal computers, but it's not, because it was about 15 minutes after the first artificial intelligence tool rolled out that we were all like hungrily fooling around with the thing to see what it would do, and with, you know, miscellaneous results, I'm sure. And so we're interested, though, in seeing where it's headed. And even the people who work at the companies like OpenAI, investors who are putting money into these technologies have no idea where it's going. And they can't, because it's just too complicated. So where does that leave us as we're trying to develop strategies around the leverage that it gives us, and those kind of questions? Where does it leave us? Well, in business we have the thing called the SWOT analysis. So we're interested in looking at the strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities and the potential threats of using the tech. And what I'm going to bring us through today is just kind of a framework for thinking about individual AI solutions as possibly good fits for our business or for our own processes. And we don't all feel the same way about where it's headed. We were having an interesting conversation before we started, and your first name again? Loretta was had some strong misgivings about AI. Maybe
not
you feel
necessarily in marketing.
Right, but in general, for sure. So we'll see that some of those misgivings are certainly justified as we go along. I didn't bring my readers, so I'm just going to muddle through here the best I can. So what are we worried about? Well, there is still a major gap between artificial intelligence and actual intelligence when it comes to human beings, right? And probably you know that when you're using GPT-4 or any of these tools, the thing that the system kicks out from your prompt, depending on the quality of the prompt, the specificity of what you asked for, can really vary. It wasn't that long ago it seemed that that Midjourney couldn't draw hands, and every time GPT-4 started a sentence, it had some strange platitude that you had to trim off there, and you basically had to rewrite what it gave you, or it sounded like a robot. But it's getting better. We see this like week to week. I use it sometimes for programming, for creating little functions, and you really have to check its work every time. So what I've just described is what you might call a feedback loop, right? So when we're using these tools, we look at our processes, and then we take a tiny little piece of what we do in our business, and we say, hey, AI, could you do this thing? And we ask it a question, and maybe our question is good, and maybe it needs some work. And when we get our question right, it gives us something that resembles an output that's desirable. And then we look at the output, and we ask ourselves, what percentage of this is useful? If a junior employee produced this product, given the instructions I provided, would I be happy? So that's the feedback loop. So there's the input, there's the prompt, there's what you're asking for based on the task, and then there's whatever goes on in that black box, and then there's you analyzing it, and then saying this is 50% okay, this is 90%, this is 2%, this is garbage, I'm throwing it out. I call that the BS ratio. However you kind of respond to what comes out. And so broadly speaking, in our marketing, we're looking at the things that are already working, if we're doing them analog and by hand, and asking ourselves how much of the processes that I'm going through right now can be gently enhanced at the beginning or replaced, ideally, with this technology. We all use Grammarly and technologies like that to kind of like catch us in spelling errors and punctuation, and that's really terrific. But how much farther can we take that? So there's two ways that AI principally helps when we're giving it tasks. One is by providing solutions, and when I use the word solution, I mean it's fully formed, seems fine, it's great, it's actually solved a problem, and it's airtight, which is the small way. It doesn't happen as often in our world, probably, and I'll explain how that works. And then there's by suggestion, and then that's where the feedback loop ends in a human being, right? So in marketing, one of the easiest ways to think about a solution feedback loop is perhaps in the PPC or pay-per-click. If we have some ads out that we're thinking of using to promote our business, we might have a little brainstorming session internally or with like an AdSense guru, quote unquote, and they will suggest, like, let's say 15 terms that describe our business, and we don't know which one is going to be effective, and then we put them out there. And the Facebook or the Google Ads system now uses artificial intelligence and probably more machine learning to figure out which ones actually have the highest amount of engagement. And it doesn't really need us to weigh in and say that was good or that was bad. In fact, it's better if we don't. Because what the system is doing is looking at actual click-throughs or engagements and conversions, and the feedback loop is really doesn't have to involve a human other than the customers or the people who are engaging with that. So that's a solution loop, because at the end of the day, if the instructions are to cut out any ads that we have that have a click-through rate or a conversion rate that's too low, below a certain threshold, just get rid of it. There's no babysitting that has to happen. And the full sort of solution loop tools out there that are available are now starting to include ones that will tinker with your display ad. If it's an image, it will say, well, do you want us to try green through red in the background and these 15 fonts and these 3 images, and we'll tell you which ones people are interested in. I heard about an author just recently. Actually, the second time I've heard this. Tim Ferriss did it, and then there's a marketer named Alex Hormoise who picked his book title out. He spent 2 years to write the book, so he was going to get the title right. So he just created an ad and a landing page and put up like 100 different titles, and he just started trimming off the ones that were falling by the wayside. And so that was a closed loop AI test that he did to see. But again, not as sophisticated. If there were millions and millions of people going to that ad, then maybe they would have used AI. If there was millions and millions of possible versions of the ad, AI would have been great. But that would probably be a simple machine learning type of scenario. But when you get more and more variables, then the AI is often used. Facebook uses it in the background with its ads as well. It will look at the, for instance, interests of all the people who looked at your advertisement, and will, over time, attempt to show it to more people who resemble the folks that have had the highest level of engagement on your ads. Now, the trick with that is that you need to spend some money in order for it to have enough data. until it reaches, at the beginning, say 100 click-throughs. It doesn't have enough data to say, well, we can build an audience based on who clicked through out of the 10,000 who saw your ad. We don't have enough information. And then it has another threshold, like put something in a cart. That's another like event that it will watch, but it needs a certain amount of those in order to create an audience based on that. And then finally, you can actually set an events for purchase, and that's the gold standard, where now you've dialed it right in, and Facebook, if it has enough people who have put something in a cart, can create an audience based on, maybe they go, well, everybody who bought one of your widgets loves Gilligan's Island, is under 34, is a woman with 2 children, lives in North America, and has recently bought a Schnauzer. And there's real fuzzy logic, right? Like, it may be all of these things, and uses certain hashtags, or it belongs to this group. So you can see this is where sort of conventional machine learning, which is like an algorithm, if you reach this point, turn left. If you reach this point under these conditions, turn left, right. That's machine learning is very linear, whereas artificial intelligence can take several giant silos of seemingly disparate data and say, we're noticing at least a 75% correlation between these things. So it kind of searches and gropes and infers from data that we as people, we haven't got the bandwidth to think about those silos of data in that sort of broad, fuzzy, correlative manner, which is why I'm personally excited about AI. And this is just a little footnote when it comes to medical stuff, because the human body is not a system of things that are not related. Everything's interrelated. All the data is currently siloed into specializations, and the companies that are developing protein folding and analysis software are starting to discover some fuzzy logic, like less than 100% correlative possibilities that are helping them make diagnoses that they couldn't make before. There was an exciting one recently about pancreatic cancer, where they can find very, very early stage pancreatic cancer using some of these models that they developed. And it's the same basic idea. There's all this separate data and some things that otherwise would be missed, but when they're present, seem to correlate to something important that deserves attention. And so, again, I get excited and I digress a little bit there. So that's kind of a discussion of the closed loop thing, and that's easy to understand, right? Where the system kind of references itself based on conditions, and they do this in industrial automation a fair bit now. With my brother-in-law developed a system that for Irving wood, there to identify wood species, and the boards go flying down a conveyor belt, and they take 100 pictures a minute, and the system knows the difference between spruce and pine about as accurately as an operator, but 10 times faster, using, again, these sort of ideas. But it references itself. It's talking to itself. Does everyone kind of understand what I'm talking about there? Yeah, so if you're looking... So just to come back to our original thing, you're looking at your internal marketing process. You've picked one that works, and you've created maybe a second version of that alongside. So you don't disturb the one, the milking cow who's giving the milk. You don't want to disturb Bessie. Just leave her alone. Let her make the leads. Make a double of Bessie, and try to enhance that with some AI technology that you're excited about. And the next thing to do is ask yourself, is this a closed loop thing that's going to be referencing itself and getting better on its own? All I have to do is put money in one end and it will learn. Is that what it is? Or is this something where I'm going to have to be part of the loop? Am I going to be part of its training? Am I going to have to also introduce some quality control? Which is probably the way that most of us are using AI. We all use GPT-4 once in a while or some version of that. Everybody, a little bit. So, what's your experience there, Rick? What's your experience with GPT-4 as far as like accuracy, and what are you using it for, by the way?
We're still discussing this.
Okay.
I own a content writing business, and the people that work for me are very, very good at what they do. Content writing and newsletters, blogs, stuff like
Right.
that. So, what we find now is we are using AI for research.
Thank you.
But we're kind of going the opposite way. It's like so many people are trying to use AI to sell a product now. We're kind of, if you ever read Blue Ocean, Red Ocean, we're kind of doing that where we advertise that, yes, you can use AI, but you're still going to need writers to make it 100% readable and focusing on the point for the customer.
Right.
So it's interesting. We're right in the middle now. We want to use it, but we can't use it fully. Maybe someday we will. So that's where we are now. We're still looking at it.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a great example.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I'm the team lead for the Kiwanis Club, the Kiwanis Amateur Sports Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the men downtown, David Dawson, Martello Alley. A lot of you probably know him. He's very familiar with it. So I gave him the words that we wanted, Kiwanis Amateur Sports Awards, looking for nominations for Rising Star, Athlete of the Year, and Most Improved Player, and Builders, Geeks and Community Builders. He put those keywords in, what it was going to be, and it kept spit it out, and it was unbelievable. I copied it into a Word document, edited what I wanted, just a few little tweaks. We were amazed at the result.
That's great. Yeah. So that's a suggestion loop, right? And Mark?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of examples.
Yeah.
One is I just typed into ChatGPT, create a snippet for a cybersecurity company based out of Kingston, Ontario.
Yep.
Again, if people don't know what a snippet is, when you do a search on the internet, that information that comes back is called a snippet. And it wasn't bad, but I looked at it and said, okay, if I was going to write the snippet myself, I've been doing this for a long time, I probably, but what it did is it did give me some ideas to use. And when I was, so it wasn't a final product as you're saying.
Yeah.
But it did give me some suggestions, and the suggestions that it gave me were useful. And then the other one was I typed into ChatGPT, gave me a telephone marketing pitch for cybersecurity. Because I do a lot of telephone marketing.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm pretty good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it came up with this pitch that I would never use.
Right.
And it was just too long and wordy.
Yeah.
But having said that, the telephone pitch that I'm using currently uses a piece of that.
Right.
So that's where it's useful for me. Just give me ideas and get me thinking outside of the box a little bit.
Love it.
And that's how I use it.
That's great. Yeah. Anyone else?
Listing houses, when you come up with a description for
Yeah.
MLS. And great as we think we are at communicating things, I will put to ChatGPT new house listing.
Yep.
What I've come up with in the Word doc, and then it just comes back so much user more friendly. And
Beautiful. Yeah, it's great. So those are all great examples. Sir, did I see a hand?
Yeah, I was just going to add that often people use ChatGPT as a, I want to ask a question, give you a response. But if you actually have a conversation with it, you can sometimes tailor your output to a little more to your desire. So if you're putting in the parameters of what you're looking for, and then ask it to understand, but not reply just yet. Do you understand? It'll go through, digest that, tell you what it understands, and then you can build upon that. Please give me your response to the previous information I've suggested, framed in this manner. Then in that response, you can take a look at that response and look back, and that response was great, but I'd like you to also take into account this, but please don't respond yet, because I'd like to also take in this parameter of this project and build in a conversation like that. Your desired output may be a little more accurate and take a little more time. That
Right.
process.
I did not realize, it never occurred to me to tell it not to respond. That's
It's an
brilliant.
incredible tool.
Yeah,
So
that's
you can
great.
You can actually have a conversation with it and build a project out. So finally, in the final output, it's not just respond to my question. You carried on a conversation for the past 20 minutes. It fully brings in all that information on silos of different areas and
Yeah.
provides that response.
That's brilliant. So yeah, we're seeing some great examples of like a suggestion loop. And the neat thing about GPT-4 over even like the previous version, I had created an API for my internal CRM that would, if I did a search for something, it did a bunch of things, but basically it let me prompt within my CRM. And that was not sophisticated. It would give me blocks of up to 800 characters of something. It would give me sometimes code snippets if I asked for them. But GPT-4, so much more superior because able to, like a human being who has a little amnesia, you can have a conversation up to a certain length without it kind of forgetting what you started out talking about. If you and I started talking about a tennis game we saw and then we digressed into talking about my vacation and then we circled back to tennis, well, if you were GPT-4, you might start to have some fuzzy memory on that. At least that's been my experience. And I notice this particularly in programming, where I have certain parameters pinned at the beginning of a discussion, and it starts to lose track of what I wanted, and it may have something to do with the prompts and context and everything else. But anyway, there's an aperture to the size of the project at this point, and that's another aspect of it, the complexity of the project you're working on. When it gets to a certain size, have you noticed this? Well, it kind of gets to a certain size and it starts to fall apart.
Yes.
No? Oh no, okay, maybe I'm pushing it too hard. Well, there you go. So, yeah, so a few kind of thoughts and suggestions there. Let's see, where? Yes. So when we're thinking about the suggestion model, right? You can kind of leave it at sort of like here's my request and here's the answer. Then I'll evaluate the answer and then push it out into the world once I'm sure it doesn't misrepresent me in some way. It's also helpful to use it the way that Mark has used it, to sort of like get it to get the thoughts moving. I recently used it, and Rick's gonna love this. I did a series of 32 to 5 minute videos with a real estate agent who was building a YouTube channel and a blog, and we shot all the videos in 2 days, 30 video. And she's an expert in her field, so all I had to do was come up with 100 questions. She prioritized them. GPT suggested them. I bounced them off of her, and I'd said, here's the question, and she would stand there and answer it. And then I would stop the video, would start another one, I had asked her another question. And she'd stand there and answer it. And then I uploaded all 30 videos to YouTube and left it overnight, and YouTube transcribed them all. And then I took the transcriptions, threw them into GPT-4, and asked it to create a blog based on what she created. And then I pushed 30 blogs back to her. She had 5 weeks of content. The prompt also provided hashtags. I said estimate reading length at the beginning of every blog. so that people can go, when they see it on LinkedIn or whatever, they go, this article will take 3 minutes to read. Here's the hashtags, the whole 9 yards. I'm not totally sure the value of hashtags these days. I've heard it both ways now, but I keep doing it because it doesn't take any extra time. But that was one thing we did. So we kind of created a chain of causality right there. And it introduced a little bit of humanity that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And then right at the end, of course, a little bit of editing, but not as much, because there's personal stories in there that GPT-4 wouldn't have come up with, which gives you the humanity. And it was cleaned up very nice with the SEO-friendly headings and hashtags, paragraphs, and all that nice structure was just there. But we had our cake and we were eating it too. So she was able to be spontaneous and fun, and she didn't have to touch a computer. And she got all that content. And it wasn't prohibitively difficult to put all that together. I was able to do all of that sort of human-assisted, AI-assisted, with videos in HD, full HD, 30 of them for about $1,500. It was 2 days work and a fair bit of driving.
I like your word humanity. That's an excellent word.
Yeah, that's going to be the missing part. So I read a book, it was like 2 decades ago now, and one of the things that it said, and it was really stuck in my head, and that is, in every system where there is an abundance, there is always a corresponding scarcity. And I'm going to just sort of end with this thought and then sort of open it up to questions if you like. But so in the AI world, we're going to see where we are seeing an abundance of content and stuff being created that doesn't necessarily feel human. And so what is the corresponding scarcity on the other side of that system, if everybody wants to take a stab at that? Like, you got this abundance of stuff that's created that is kind of a little bit like hotel art, right? It's not a Rembrandt, it's hotel art. You know what I mean? And that's where the technology is at. It's improving, but what's the corresponding scarcity if there's a lot of artificiality?
I was going to say connection for humans.
Yeah. What other synonyms could we use? Adjectives. Those are all correct and on the right.
Ingenuity.
Yeah. Yep. And another one is deep specialization. So I do some consulting for the HVAC industry, but that's broad, right? That's kind of broad, but it's not that part. It's the wholesale distributing side of the HVAC industry. And inside of that, it's sales support and retail support by wholesale distributor. So when you get into the deeper side of specialization inside of an industry, you get farther and farther away from tasks and semantics that can be done spontaneously with a natural language model, because it's so specific. I don't know if you found, has anyone had an experience like this where you're in real estate, and okay, I want to talk about real estate that's related to commercial real estate. We haven't gone deep far enough. How about syndicated real estate? Now it's lost. It's not right. I know the broad strokes, but where is the 30 years of nuanced experience that makes your blog so compelling, where someone goes, oh my goodness, I just read this article by Steve Smith on commercial real estate syndication in Alberta, in the west end of Calgary, and the specific socioeconomic movements that are making that viable and what the threats are. And it was fascinating. I see a thought emerging. No? Yes. So now what you've done is there's certain degrees of specificity and specialization in your content that GPT-4 won't start there, because it's too far down the rabbit hole, and it still takes actual intelligence and experience and specialization. So if you have that expert in front of you who is able to volunteer this information, how do you marry that? How do you marry that person to AI? Now, one of my clients in Toronto, who is in the example I'm giving you, we originally wanted to develop a blog for him, like this was 15 years ago, and I don't have that depth of understanding of that topic. And although he is absolutely brilliant guy, manages like a $1.5 billion fund, so he knows what he's doing, his English was terrible. And it's his first language. He was born in this country. It's just I've never heard such spontaneously terrible sentence structure. Maybe you're thinking that about me right now, but this is even worse. So in the age of AI, you could have that guy talking about the very, very specific specialized knowledge he has, and then flip it back into GPT-4 to create a very coherent narrative. But as long as it's correct, and as long as he's saying things that are correct, will now also be grammatically correct and may potentially have some sort of natural flow. So you have the opportunity here to augment the actual intelligence if there's some specific communication skill that's lacking. Now we're seeing also there's voiceovers being done that are starting to sound pretty good. And you can, as long as you don't just let it, it's still suggestion loop level, because you have to go in and sometimes take fancy words, French words, pronunciations, or local non-standard words that it doesn't understand and write them out phonetically, but it sounds pretty good once you get there. I just did a video ad for someone where we had to throw the whole thing out because there was one word we couldn't get, so we had to have it voiced by a human being. It just couldn't do it. It was like one syllable out of a whole 45-second presentation, and it just wouldn't pass mustard. So we see that happening, and I recently watched a presentation around a system where you can train someone with your video. You're sitting in front of a camera within a frame, wearing the same clothes, and you read from these cards that the system gives you, and then you feed it a script. So using our earlier example, if I haven't tried this yet, and it's on my list, the examples, of course, look great because it didn't show us any of the failures. But going back to this original idea, this busy CEO doesn't have time to be in front of the camera and is almost inarticulate. You could sit down with your phone, record an interview with him, and then having trained the system with his video, come back and create all those videos that I did with the real estate agent and go through that whole process and create sort of authentic, sort of multi-week campaigns around actual intelligence augmented by the artificial intelligence. So again, we have our closed loop because it's a suggestion loop, but we're chaining some things together, and that's where at this stage in the technology's development, that's where the power is going to be. It's the hand-holding strategy and chaining some things together so that you end up with a product that still passes mustard as something that's human and legitimate and brings actual value. It's not just filling space. So I hope that was helpful. Any questions or? No, you covered it all.
Jason, I find it great that, now I know someone that's been involved in that. And I'm sure you started like a long time ago. Kind of looking at that and playing with it when it first became kind of popular.
The early
Feel free to
stuff
use
was-
him as a resource, that's what he does for a living.
Yeah.
So,
The early stuff was rough. We were doing some SEO work, and the in the closed loop, the test was, first of all, when you read it, if you have sometimes writing done overseas, there are people just like in Canada, there's people with great English and people with terrible English, and you hope that when you get their writing samples, which seem good enough to get them to do the job, will consistently create a quality of work that's like that if you're going overseas. And so what I had started with was a small team of people there that I had worked with before, and they were doing pretty good, but for some reason everybody was off their game, and I was spending at least 2/3 of the project editing before I could push stuff live. And then we would get it into a WordPress site and use an SEO plugin like Yoast to say, what do you think of this? And it would say, I hate it. That's what you basically would say. There are no headings. I don't, you're using passive voice all the time. Everybody know what passive voice is? Sort of, I don't know if I can explain it right now, but it's basically where it's a sentence structure thing. And the early sort of pre-GPT-3, this is before GPT even kind of hit the scene. This is a whole bunch of little tools I was using that I don't know what the technology was, to be honest with you, but when I was taking the contractor stuff and trying to get it to convert to something that wasn't it didn't have passive voice and had headings, it could do some of it, but not all of it. It was just a lot, and it was almost more work than writing it from scratch sometimes.
Mhm.
But now, Mark, but now much better,
So I'm intrigued about the Google ad campaign aspect of this, because I haven't done this in a while. I haven't done the Google ads in probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Before the AI really, now you can do sort of manual split testing and things like that.
Sure.
Back in those days. So are you saying that the current Google offering will do sort of automatic split testing, and you can throw 10 different things at it and it'll come back to you with, it sort of does this automatically? Is that
It's all yeah. There's the PPC system on Google. What you would basically has always done that, where you say, here's my 10 examples, right? And you sit there and you watch them and you go, these perform really well. This did nothing for some reason.
Right.
This violated their terms and conditions and they shut it off.
Right.
So I'm going to go with that. And that's not even, you could give that job to your lowest paid employee and they would do it just fine. So,
Right.
which is the highest number, and then below this threshold, shut them off. That's pretty simple.
So are you saying that
so what I'm
today's-
saying, that's already been there to answer your question. What we have now is some services that will tie into your Google account and will help you test a lot more variations, right? And
Is this
they will
third-party
try
stuff or is
things.
it
Yes.
inside Google?
Yeah, you tie it
It's
into that.
third-party stuff?
Yeah.
I would like to know more about that.
Yeah. There's
So
a few of them.
If you have my email address.
Yeah, we'll go down the rabbit hole. But there's ones that will do just the text. There's ones that will now fool around with the ad copy, and there's ones that will do this for for Facebook
Yeah,
ads
that was
as
the
well.
one that you said, like changing the background color of the ads and things like that to
Right.
find out. So,
Yeah, you're like, green. How about that, right? I'd rather be rich than wrong, right? Or rich than right.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, I really like the blue. And the nice thing is that it completely collapses the internal discussion around personal preference, because we're not really the KPI that we're shooting for is not internal consensus. Like, we got 100% consensus on that last ad campaign that failed, right? That we made no money
and
on.
you could offer this as a service, creating such an ad campaign?
We could.
You do? Okay, that's
Yeah,
something that we could hire you to do?
We could, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not thinking about that.
All right.
Yeah, 'cause instead of me having to try to figure all of those nuts and bolts and.
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk
We
about
can
it.
throw some money at you.
Yeah, there you go. I wouldn't object to that. So, any other thoughts there? I've been rambling a bit. I don't drink coffee very often anymore, so this is a big day for me.
Okay, well,
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Have you, in your travels and thoughts, have you come across Pictory.ai?
Pictory?
Pictory.ai.
No, I haven't.
So it's an AI-generated video response tool. So you upload a framework of either just text, and it'll source out the video to put to that text.
Really?
And with audio, put the person speaking, put music in the background, and then publish that. So someone who's a small business that has difficulty generating video content for themselves, there's a plethora of free video
That's great.
available that AI will choose to automatically incorporate into your text. And then with that, you can go in and search appropriate videos if you want to swap out the video, or if you want to do video editing right properly as well. It's a great tool.
That's terrific.
Sorry, what's it called again?
Pictory.ai.
Victory?
AI, let me check here. It's AI or IO?
P-I-C-T.
Pictory? Yeah.
O-R-Y, like victory.
Yep.
I am writing that down. There's so many of them. And that's the other danger here. So we were talking about threats. When you're doing a SWOT analysis, like at a high level, you're thinking, what are the threats here? The biggest threat is that there are so many shiny objects in this space now. Sorry. The biggest threat is that there's so many shiny objects in this space that you almost have to budget a certain amount of like fooling around time. Otherwise, it will eat you alive.
Now, as a comment to all this new technology, and everybody, see, before AI, it was difficult for the average person to have a really nice presentation for video, or even to get images that they're looking for, because you have to buy those images if you're not producing them yourself.
Yeah.
And how do you get that quality? Now everybody has the ability to create stunning images, stunning video, and the internet's just ablaze with video reels and everything else. I would call attention to debranding. So that your advertising, so that as things become really flashy, really entertaining, and engaging, debranding is an opportunity to be able to stand back out and get that message back out to the consumer in amongst all that clutter that's happening. So as more tools are there, and I see everyone progressing at a really fast rate this past year, there's a great opportunity to do the opposite, and then in doing so, stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's imagine 3 years from now, almost everybody and their dog has completely dialed in their YouTube videos so that everything looks so slick, right? And there's beautiful little particles, and there's the windows are coming in and out, and the system is automatically doing all these things. It makes everyone look great. And then someone comes on and leans in and bumps into the camera, right? And their thumbnail looked a little, my son uses the term derpy, and you know exactly from context what that means. And he's kind of off the screen, and he's got a weird quirk. And once in a while, he just leaves altogether and comes back in 5 seconds. And he's wearing a funny shirt. You're slowing down for a car accident at that point, right? You know, and you're going down a pristine highway, and all the cars look great, and you see one on the side of the road that's twisted in wreckage, and you go, oh, look at that. And that there's going to be a place for that, right?
Well, it's like if I showed up wearing a suit from the 1970s. Everybody looks normal today because we're all normalized. And as we progress in style change and everything else, we all look normal. But if I wore clothing from decades ago, I stand out. It's the same thing with the advertising. If you take a point in time at which you step out of that normalized level back to something that was in that sense, then there's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And when it really requires you to answer a very, very difficult, almost spiritual question when you're developing content around your personal brand, especially, if you can answer, who am I? And then secondly, how can I be courageous enough to lead with that? Because once you've, we see this in the world of art, the more authentic you are, instead of being a version of yourself or a persona, well, the more vulnerable you are to criticism, because you have not just created a product and then people criticize your baby. Somehow you have also you've shipped yourself as a product and you have made yourself vulnerable to criticism, which is a whole new level of apprehension. So, but that's what it's going to take. And basically your goal becomes, your KPI changes from whatever it used to be to maybe, I would like a certain number of trolls giving me a hard time on YouTube and saying just god-awful things about my video. That's what I'm shooting for. Plus, there's going to be some nice comments because some of these people are my customers and do get value, but I want the whole crap sandwich, right? And just being comfortable with that, leaning into, the more polarizing you are, the better you have done the job. Because if you're a generalist, you don't offend anybody, and you're invisible. You're a ghost,
Okay, I'm going to hold things
Yep,
there.
go ahead.
Just because we
Yep,
want
carry
to
on.
do our introductions.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to ask Jason to